While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. One who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the object of the senses. The senses require real engagement, and they and and if they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. If this material world, in the material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of other demigods in the heavenly planets, is subjected to the influence of the sense objects, and the only method to get out these pools of material existence is to become Krishna conscious. Lord Shiva was deep in meditation. But when Parvati agitated him to sense pleasure, he agreed to the proposal, and as a result, Kartikeya was born. Then Haridasa Thakura was a young devotee. When Haridas Thakura was a young devotee of the Lord, he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Deva, but Haridasa easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna, as illustrated in the above mentioned verse of Sri Yamunacharya. The sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material enjoyment due to his higher taste of spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. That is the secret of success. One who is not therefore in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is sure ultimately to fail, for the slightest throe of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. Sri Rupa Goswami has given us this direction. Prapanchikataya Buddhaya Hari Sambandhi Vastunah Mumuksubhin Parityajo Vairagyam Palgu Kathyate. Bhaktirasamrita Sindhu. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in the service of the Lord. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in the service of the Lord. Those who are without knowledge, if Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects, and as a result, although they, they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain the perfect stage of renunciation. Their so-called renunciation is called palgu, or less important. On on the on the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of Lord. Therefore, he does not become a victim of material consciousness. For example, for an impersonalist, the Lord of or the absolute being impersonalist cannot yet. Whereas an impersonalist tries to avoid good eatables, a, a devotee knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, and that he eats all that is offered to him devotion him in devotion. So after after offering good eatables to the Lord, the devotee takes the remnants called prasadam. This everything thus everything becomes spiritualized, and there is no danger of the downfall. The devotee takes prasadam in Krishna consciousness, whereas the non-devotee reject it as material. The impersonalist therefore cannot enjoy life due to his artificial renunciation, and for that reason, slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again into the pool of material existence. It is said that such a soul, even thought rising up to the point of liberation, falls down again due to his not having support in devotional service. But a person free from attachment and aversion, and unable to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom, can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. It's interesting. Hyata Vishayam Pumsah Ragadvesha Vimuktastu Ragadvesha Vimuktastu Vishayam Indriyani Charan Atma Vishayan Viphi Atma Prasadam Adhikachkati. But a person free from all attachment and aversion, and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom, can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. It is already explained that one may externally control the senses. It is already explained. It is already explained that one may externally control the senses. It is already explained that one may externally control the senses by some artificial process, but unless the senses are engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is every chance of a fall. Although the person in Krishna consciousness may apparently be on the sensual plane, because of his being Krishna consciousness, he has no attachment to sensual activities. The Krishna consciousness person is concerned only with the satisfaction of Krishna and nothing else. Therefore, he is transcendental to all attachment and detachment. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anyone. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything. If Krishna wants, the devotee can do anything which is ordinarily understand. And if Krishna does not want, he shall not do that which he would have originally done from his own satisfaction. Therefore, to act or not to act is within his control because he acts only under the direction of Krishna. This conclusion, this consciousness is causeless mercy of the Lord, which the devotee can achieve in spite of his being attached so sensual platform. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. To this satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have never transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Unless one is in Krishna consciousness, there is no possibility to peace. So it is confirmed in the first chapter that that when one understands that Krishna is only enjoyer of all the good result of the sacrifice, all penance, that he is the proprietor of all universal manifestations, and that he is the real friend of all living entities, then only can one have real peace. Therefore, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be a final goal for the mind. Disturbance is due to want of all ultimate goal. Disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal, and when one is certain that Krishna is enjoyer, proprietor, and friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, being about peace. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress and without peace, however much be make a show of peace and spiritual advancement of life. Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested peaceful condition which can be achieved only in a relationship with Krishna. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress and is without peace, however much he may make show of peace and spiritual advancement in life. Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested, powerful condition which can be achieved only in relationship with Krishna. As a boat on the water is swept away by strong wind, even one of the roaming senses, one which a mind focuses, can carry away a mind intelligence, unless all of the senses is engaged in the service of the Lord. When one of them engaged, unless all of the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, even one if them engaged in sense gratification can deviate the devotee from the path of transcendental advancement. The men, as mentioned as mentioned in the Maharaja as mentioned in the life of Maharaja Ambarisha, all all of the senses must be engaged in Krishna consciousness, for that is the correct technique for controlling the mind. Therefore, a mind armed on whose senses are restrained from their object is certainly of study intelligent. One can curb the forces of sense gratification only by means of Krishna consciousness, of engaging all the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. One can one can curb the senses of sense gratification only by means of Krishna consciousness, of engaging all the senses in transcendental loving service of the Lord. As enemies, uh, as enemies are curbed by serious force, the senses can similarly be curbed not by any human endeavor, but only by keeping them engaged in the service of the Lord. One who has understood this, one who understood this, that only by Krishna consciousness is one really established in intelligence, and that one should practice this art under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master is called sadhaka, or the suitable candidate for liberation. What is the night for all beings is the night, the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings, the night for the enforced introspective sage. Oh, sorry, excuse me. There are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities of the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for portion materially absorbed. Materialistic person remain asleep is such a night due to their ignorance of sense realization. The introspective sage remains alert in the night of the materialistic man. The sage feels transcendental pleasure in the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the mind is materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dream of material varieties of sense pleasure, feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in his sleeping condition. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. He goes on with he goes on he goes on with his self-realization activities understood by materialistic reactions. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace and not the man who strives to satisfy such desire. Although the vast ocean is always filled with the water, it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water, but the ocean remains in same steady. It is not agitated, nor does it cross beyond the limit of its brink. That is also true of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness. As long as one has a material body, the, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of the fullness. Fools. Krishna conscious man is not need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. Therefore, he is like the ocean, always full of himself. This desire, the desirous way may come to him like water. Desires may come to him like the waters of the rivers that flow into the ocean, but the steady in his activities, and he is not even slightly disturbed by desires for sense gratification. That is a proof of a Krishna consciousness man, one who has lost all inclinations for material sense gratification, although the desire are present, because he remains satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He can remain steady like the ocean and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who want to fulfill desire even up to the limit of liberation, what to speak to material success, never attain peace. The fruit of workers is salvation. The fruit of workers, the salvationist, and also the yogis who are after mystic powers are all unhappy because in fulfilled desires. But the person is in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord. But the person in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord. And he has no desire to be fulfilled. And he has no desire to be fulfilled. In fact, he does not even desire liberation from so-called material bondage. The devotees of Krishna have no material desires, and therefore they are in perfect peace. A person who has given up all desire for sense gratification, who gives free from a person who has given up all desire for sense gratification, lives free from desires, who has given up all senses of a, a person who has given up all desire for sense gratification, who lives free from desire, who has given up the sense of proprietorship, proprietorship, and devoid of false ego, He alone can attain real peace. To become desireless means to not desire anything for sense gratification. In other words, desire for becoming Krishna consciousness is not actually. It is. In other words, desire for becoming Krishna conscious is actually desirelessness. No, to understand one's actual position as the eternal servitor for Krishna, to understand one's actual position as the eternal servitor for Krishna, without falsely shaming this material body, to be oneself, and without falsely claiming proprietorship over anything in the world, is perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. One who is situated in the perfect stage knows that because Krishna is the proprietor of everything, everything must be used. Everything must be used for the satisfaction of Krishna. Arjuna did not want to fight for his own sense gratification, but when he became fully Krishna consciousness, he fought because Krishna wanted him to fight. But for himself, there was no desire to fight. But for Krishna, the same Arjuna fought for his best ability. Real desirelessness is desire for satisfaction of Krishna, not an artificial attempt at abolish desire. The living entity cannot be desireless or senseless, but he does have to change the quality of the desire. A materially desireless person certainly knows that everything belongs to Krishna, Isavasyamidam Sarvam, and therefore he does not falsely claim proprietorship of anything. The transcendental knowledge is based on self-realization, namely knowing perfectly well that every living entity is an eternal part and parcel of Krishna in spiritual identity. Krishna is transcendental identity. This transcendental knowledge is based on self-realization, namely knowing perfectly well that every living entity is an eternal part and parcel of Krishna in spiritual identity, and that the eternal position of the living entity is therefore never on the level of Krishna is greater than him. Knowing perfectly every living entity is an eternal part and parcel of Krishna on spiritual identity, and that eternal position of living entity is therefore never on the level of Krishna or greater than him. This understanding of Krishna consciousness is the basic principle of real peace. That is the way of the spirit. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life, and attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the core of that, one can enter into the kingdom of God. One can attain Krishna consciousness of divine life or divine life at once without a second, or one may not attain such state of life even after millions of births. It is only matter of understanding and accepting the fact. Uh, Katwanga Maharaja attained this state of life just a few minutes before his death by surrendering into Krishna. Nirvana means Nirvana means ending the process of materialistic life. According to Buddhist philosophy, there is only void after the completion of the material life. But Bhagavad Gita teaches differently. Actual life begins after the completing of this material life. For the gross materialists, it is sufficient to know that one has to end this materialistic way of life. But for persons who are spiritually advanced, there is there is another life after the materialistic life. Before ending this life, if one fortunately becomes Krishna conscious, he at once attains the stage of Brahman Nirvana. There is no difference between the kingdom of God and the devotional service with the Lord. There is no difference between the kingdom of God and the devotional service of the Lord, since both of them are on absolute plane. To be engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord is to have attained to spiritual kingdom and the material world. There are activities of sense gratification, whereas in the spiritual world there are activities of Krishna consciousness. Attainment of Krishna consciousness even during this life is immediately attainment of Brahman, and one who is situated in Krishna consciousness has certainly already entered into the kingdom of God. Brahman is the last of opposite of matter. Brahman is just the opposite of matter. Therefore, Brahmisthiti means not on the platform of material activities. Devotional service of the Lord accepted in the Bhagavad Gita. Devotional service of the Lord is accepted in the Bhagavad Gita. The liberated stage. Sagunam samatitya tam brahma bhuya yakalpate. Therefore, Brahma Sthiti is liberation from material bondage. The Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has summarized the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita as being the content for the whole text. In the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matter of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga is the second chapter. Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have been clearly discussed, and glimpse of Bhakti Yoga has also been given as content for the complete text. Arjuna said, Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? If you think that intelligence is better than the fruitive work, The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, has very elaborately described the constitution of the soul in previous chapter with a view of delivering his intimate friend Arjuna from the ocean of material grief and the path and the path of realization has been recommended Buddhi yoga or Krishna consciousness. Sometimes Krishna consciousness is misunderstood to be inertia, and one with such misunderstanding often withdraws to secluded place to become fully Krishna conscious by chanting the holy name of Krishna, but without being trained in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. It is not advisable to chant the holy name of Krishna in secluded place where one may acquire only cheap ad, uh, adoration from the inner innocent public. Arjuna also thought that Krishna consciousness is Buddhi yoga or intelligence in spiritual advancement or knowledge as something like the retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerity at secluded place. In other words, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse. But as sincere student, he placed his matter before his master and questioned Krishna as his best course of action. And in answer, Lord Krishna elaborately explained Karma Yoga or the work in Krishna consciousness. It is third chapter.